I've seen founders like Brian Chesky of Airbnb, Mark Zuckerberg, Facebook, founders of Shopify. They're popping up on podcasts on my feed.
Imagine the founder of Airbnb starts to decide to try out a bunch of different properties. It's fascinating to see the founders of the companies show more about their lives. How do they work? What do they do? How do they run the meetings? People need to market themselves as well. How do you think about yourself as a personal brand? What are the skills, the experience, and personality that you have? Your personal brand should not be outsourced to somebody else to do it. It's personal. It means to be you. My mission is to help people communicate better. Communications is never going to go out of style. It's a skill that is one of the most important skills on the planet today. So I have a book I wrote. It's coming out on October 8th. It's called The 7 Rules of Self-Reliance: How to Stay Low, Keep Moving, Invest in Yourself, and Own Your Future. The book's actually main purpose is to help people kind of have a playbook for how to navigate now. Hi, Andy.
Hey Maha.
How are you? It's so nice to meet you.
Likewise, likewise. I've been following you for some time, so it's pretty awesome to
I
connect. Thank you
know,
so
it's so
much.
exciting. It's so exciting for me too, because I also been like seeing all your comments and following you. So like, oh my God, we finally got here.
I know, I
What a great
know.
little setup you have. It looks very cozy. I like the flamingo doorstep.
Thank you so much. No one's ever brought that up. You're the first to call it out. Very cool. How
I noticed the little things are the big things.
are you?
I'm wonderful. I'm really excited to be here. I'm really excited to connect with you. And things are good. I went to mentor some entrepreneurs today. Rachel set it up. It was really fun just to be out in the wild and talk to entrepreneurs about what they're facing, what they're confused about, and what they want the most help with. And a lot of the questions were like, marketing is so complicated today. Where should we spend our time? Where should we spend our money? What should we be doing? It's not easy.
Interesting. How did you initially get into the marketing space, Maha?
Honestly, I started my when I went to school, my university, I was really kind of captivated by international business and marketing of like, oh, how do companies work in global markets? How do they market themselves? Basics, the 4 Ps, price, product, promotion, placement, all that kind of stuff. So I was like, really need to learn how do companies think about marketing? How do people think about marketing their brands? And because the way consumers' habits have changed, so are the ways that we need to market to them. So it used to be television commercial was the most effective way to reach a mass audience. Obviously, with the invention of the mobile phones and smartphones, technology is now really based on mobile. And so really making sure that you go to consumers where they spend their most time. And where do you spend your most time, Andy? On social, on the internet, through YouTube, through social media channels, through even now the upcoming, not upcoming, I think it's here, and the growth of streaming platforms, streaming services, not just the Hulus, the Amazons, the Rokus, the Tubies, but just also the 24-hour news is now streaming online. There's just so much content out there, and they want to meet consumers where they are, and they're online.
Is it like, given there's just so much content coming out, is it just like a matter of putting out volume? Or is there like, is quantity, quality? What's your thoughts just with so much coming out?
Yeah, I think, content is king based on the value that you provide your audience, right? So it doesn't matter how frequent you post, it's what you post. It's not where you're posting, it's the story you're telling on that platform. It's how are you using that platform in a native way so that you are really leaning into the features and attributes of that platform. Like TikTok runs very differently than Instagram does. Like TikTok, you can be discovered by anyone. Instagram, they really have to be following you. Obviously, they're changing the algorithm now to suggest people and to see what kind of patterns you like and serve up content for you. But I really feel like the person who loves to write blogs and read blogs on Medium is very different than the audience that subscribes to YouTube and stuff like that.
Interesting. Maha, which social media platform do you find most comfortable for you? Because it feels so overwhelming being able to having to contextualize with every single platform.
Yeah, I mean, I feel I started out I started out on Facebook. I was gonna say Facebook or Twitter first. Facebook first. I'm very active on Instagram. I love LinkedIn and I love Instagram. Those are the two that I'm most comfortable with. And I spend the most time on. I I'm a news junkie, so I like to consume news and stuff like that. So I usually consume news on Twitter because, or X as it's called now. So I like to just like whatever, I like to go to Instagram for following people I actually know and Twitter for people I don't really know, but like I like to see what they're writing about or what they're talking about, if it's topical or news based. So it's really kind of depending on what's my news diet or information diet that day that I'd like to digest.
Interesting. Yeah, I was going to ask like if there were any sort of strategies, but it's constantly going to be changing. Algorithms are constantly changing. So I guess the better question is, how do you go about what's the best way of giving value?
I think the biggest thing I think about when you're trying to give value for somebody is think of like really get to know them. Like I need to really get to know you. What does Andy care about? What is Andy following? What is he into? So first of all, it's more of like information gathering and listening. I need to know what is it that makes you tick and what is the thing that you value. So first of all, it starts with listening. Then I have to figure out, okay, what's the thing that I feel like is a gap that I can fill for him? Is it a contact I have? Is it a relationship I have? Is it introduction I can make? Is it something new that I learned that I want to share with him? Like I have to figure out, first of all, what are you interested in? And then how can I start to think about delivering something to you in the areas that you find the most valuable? The other thing also I love to talk to people about when you're trying to create value for other people is how do you tell that story or sell that message, send that message to them in a way that resonates with them? Like, how are you connecting with your audience authentically? How are you doing something in a way that's going to get their attention? And I feel like the people who give the most value to their audiences through social media are really just giving away a lot of advice and information based on their experience. And that's one, shows their credibility, and two, really helps the audience understand that this is something that they've learned through experience or they have the expertise for it. And that way it makes it even more credible as well.
Interesting. So let's say someone who's listening to this, they have maybe 100 followers, their posts maybe get like 60 reach, they might get one comment, which is like a random emoji. How do they get to know their audience so they know what to talk about?
How do they get to know the audience so they know what they want to talk about? I think, a lot of times people are developing messages on like what they think is important to say. And like, okay, I'm just going to, whatever I'm preparing is going to like try to sell it to them. Again, goes back to that listening part. Like, how do you know what to say to them? You got to listen. You have to really understand what they care about and what they want to focus on. Even for me and my business, I deal with the press a lot, right? And so I don't just send a pitch to the press and say, hey, I'd like you to write a story about this X, Y, or Z. I have to follow their beat, watch their stories, see what kind of things they care about. Like, what are the stories that they are writing about? Do they cover tech or do they cover health? Do they cover entertainment? Do they cover sports? Do they cover books or do they cover film? And really tailoring my message and customizing what I'm trying to say that fits into kind of what their stream of workload or what their stream of focus is going to be.
Interesting. When sort of pitching a story to the press, let's say you have a list of 100 tech writers, is it better to just blast the 100 tech writers with a tailored tech-based story, or individually message each author and writer and do 100?
Yeah, the answer is going to be the hard one, which is you really need to customize your connections with people. Like you don't like it, Andy, when someone sends you like a generic email that they've sent to everybody, or dear guest or dear friend. Like you want something that actually shows that, oh, I listened to your episode of your podcast, or I saw you post about this article that was really interesting. Here's something similar that I saw. So one, when you're dealing with the press, customize your message. Find a way to connect with them and in a way that they will feel that this isn't like a cookie cutter, generic email that you're sending out. The other thing is think about how you can make their job easier. Can you share them a link? Can you share them an infographic? Can you share them some additional research? Like go the extra mile to do a bit of the heavy lifting for them. And that's what we call packaging the news. So package it up, like make it easy for them to go through. And like, instead of talking to someone, for example, about the benefits of sleep for your health, maybe attach a study. Here's a really interesting recent sleep study that shows if you get X hours of sleep, it can increase your longevity of your life by X years. Like, try to add value to them by giving them the extra mile of doing some homework and research for them.
Yeah, I was gonna ask that question where like, how do you go about coming up with an interesting story where it feels like you need some crazy headline like 21-year-old millionaire or just raised $100 million or we invented this AI drone delivery bot. If you're sort of, a normal person or a normal business owner, how do you go ahead and come up with an interesting story that a author would want to pick up?
Yeah, try to think like you are a consumer. You should think like one. What makes you stop? What makes you stop your thumb when you're scrolling? What makes you open an email that you get from Morning Brew or Business Insider or whatever newsletter you subscribe to? So you want to think like consumers think. Like, I want to know how to save money. I want to know how to be healthier. I want to know how to get more protein in my diet. I want to know how to, get a new client. I want to know how to build my personal brand. So think of things that you want people to like, oh, when they click on that, you're like, you're solving a problem for them or you're giving them information that they need. The biggest thing I can advise you, Andy, is put yourself in the shoes of the consumer, right? What is the thing that the consumer will understand when you send this message, and make sure that it's compelling and that it's, interesting and that it's something that they will really love to click into.
That's amazing. Maha, tell me a bit about your personal branding journey. I've seen that you've been ramping up the content. I've been seeing you have an amazing podcast that you've been doing over the last nearly a year. I don't know how long it's been, but I keep seeing that coming up. Tell me about your personal branding sort of journey.
So thank you so much for asking. So I'm Egyptian. I'm 100% Egyptian. I'm born and raised in Minnesota, which is where I am right now. I spent half of my life in the US in Minnesota and the other half overseas. So I went to school in Minnesota, and I studied undergraduate international business marketing and French, my undergraduate degree, and I got a master's degree in communications. And I worked at General Mills. I was like a very entry-level employee working in promotions, working on sports marketing programs, and kind of helping the company do some firsts, like first time to go to the NASCAR, first time to go to the Olympics. Really just I love sports. If you follow me, I talk about sports a lot. And I got to really get involved in sports marketing. Like, how do you work with athletes? How do you work with the teams? How do you build an affinity or relationship with the consumer that loves the same sports that you do? So anyway, so I worked at General Mills, and then I moved to Egypt in 1997, mostly for personal reasons. My mother had multiple sclerosis, was sick. And so I was moving to Egypt with my parents. They decided, after living in the US for nearly 40 years, that they were finally going to go back to Egypt and live out the golden years and no more harsh Minnesota winters. So I moved back to Egypt with my parents, and I was like, I got to get a job. What am I going to do? I got to work. I got to find either a Pepsi, a Coca-Cola, Unilever, a P&G, an American company in Egypt, or work for a local company or family office. And to be honest with you, when I moved to Egypt, I was 27 years old. I didn't really speak Arabic that good. I didn't have any friends. I didn't really, kind of starting from scratch at an age where like a lot of people already had like their high school and college friends and their professional friends. So my journey was basically, I got to start from scratch, reset the button in Egypt, got a job, worked in tech, helped launch mobile phones, a lot of mobile phones in the Middle East and North Africa, worked in tech. The introduction of the internet came into the Middle East, and I was there. And then I ended up working at Google with the introduction of social media and all of Google's tools. I ended up working with Netflix and helping them launch into the Middle East. I helped Uber enter the Middle East market through some work I did with Careem. So I was working in the communications department of Careem, and that's like the local Middle East version of Uber. And then when I left the company, Uber came in and did not a takeover, a big investment in the company, and ended up doing a partnership. And they both exist now in the Middle East. So I worked in tech. I work at a lot of tech companies. And then I was living in Dubai, and some of my friends, I was living in Dubai for, I don't know, 7 or 8 years. And one summer I came home to Minnesota, and someone said, hey, what are you reading? What are you working on? I said, nothing. I'm looking for a book to read. What should I get? They said, you should buy this book called Gary Vaynerchuk book called Crush It by Gary Vaynerchuk. And I met Gary. And so then I was like, oh, he's interesting. I like what he does. So let me see more about his business. And so I started learning a lot about building your personal brand. Like companies are very good at marketing themselves. Now people need to market themselves as well. How do you think about yourself as a personal brand? What are the skills, the experience and personality that you have? Those are the three main components of what makes a personal brand. And personal branding is not really, a lot of people think of it as self-promotion. And I always think of it as idea promotion. Like, how do you sell your experience, your ideas, your expertise? Because people tend to follow people, not companies. And so how do you, as the founder of your company, what do you do to kind of build your reputation of your business? And so that's sort of my journey into my personal brand. And then I thought, well, I should help people communicate at scale. So my mission is to help people communicate better. I have a podcast. I have a book coming out in October. I try now through my social media, give away a lot of communications tips about key messaging and storytelling and communications and getting free press and how to network and how to build your brand and how to worry about or think about your reputation. So that's kind of a lot of what I'm passionate about doing. I love communications. I love this business. I love being with people. I love talking to the press. And so that's a little short version of my personal brand from 0 to 100.
That's so cool. With all this sort of content that you create, giving people value on how to communicate better, is that just to get more eyeballs to your page than your company, and eventually people might want to work with your company, Maha? What does it look like?
Yeah, I mean, honestly, you see, I don't really sell my services on any of my social media platforms. I want to just help people communicate better. I feel like for me, that's my way of giving back into the community, into the market. And communications is never going to go out of style. Everyone's going to need to know how to communicate, even with the internet, even with social media, even with AI. It's a skill that is one of the most important skills on the planet today. And being able to be a good storyteller and to articulate your ideas or connect with audiences is so important. And so that's kind of what's driving my motivation to post and share and do free workshops and do things to help more people communicate better. And I really feel a lot of people want to learn about how to be better communicators.
Even when you become a really good communicator, like looking at the sort of social media landscape over the last 10 years, there's a lot of people that come and go, people sort of peak and then there's troughs. Does that have something to do with the algorithm, or are they changing up their communication style? What's happening there?
You know, think about what you have observed over time about how communications has changed, right? So, I think the pandemic taught us a lot about like going behind the scenes, like when you saw like news anchors reporting from their homes and the dog would walk in the scene or the baby would be crying in the background. Like people don't want the polished stuff anymore. They like the authentic, raw, walking down a street, filming a video, showing us where you're at, what you're doing. And I feel like that's made it more accessible for more people because you don't have to produce glossy videos with official cameras. Your iPhone or your Android can do such a terrific job. And I feel like that's the beauty of communications. It can be real time, it can be authentic, it can be raw, and it still can be good.
I love it. Yeah, because if you're walking down the park and you're just filming this selfie video, you're not necessarily cutting every pause, you're not having a crazy 3 second hook. How does that perform compared to the ones that's really edited and there's a whole 3 act story in this 90-second reel?
I mean, I think a lot of the algorithm is changing a lot and consumer behaviors change a lot too. So I find that both work. It's not an either or world. It's an and world. Like this, it works to post videos where you're walking down the street and it works to have a 3 second hook in the beginning of the film and then talk about what you want to talk about. I feel like everything works. I don't think that there's like, you should only do this or only do that. Because the minute everyone starts doing this, the algorithm or consumer habits change. And then you're having to like keep up with the Joneses all the time and change based on trends, which I don't think businesses should do.
I started doing this thing where every week I film a 30 to 60 minute sort of Zoom call where I just go through thoughts I've written down on my notes, and it's called Lessons. I think I'm like 9 episodes in, and I've been
That's
using this
cool.
tool called Opus Clip where I just put it in, and it would generate 30 clips using AI on its own. What do you think is going to happen with that direction? It's crazy. The clips aren't that good. It's just all machine generated. But sort of
I
getting
know, but it's
reach.
efficient. It's an efficient way for you to weed out what you think AI picks are the best clips. I feel
Mm,
like a lot of people are nervous about AI taking away jobs. I think it's going to create an enormous amount of jobs. Look at the internet. The internet created an incredible amount of jobs. And so I feel like, the sky's the limit. We still don't even know what it's going to be able to do and how it's going to help us, from education and healthcare to medicine and science and technology. I feel it's going to be an incredible and positive impact in our lives. And now going back to your question about like the content and the editing and the tool that generated 30 clips from your podcast or from your Zoom video, doesn't that save you a lot of time and money? I
It's
just find it's efficiency, and it'll free you up to do other things.
Yeah, really cool. When you talked about sort of companies sort of now sort of focusing on like branding over the last 6 months, I don't know if it's been intentional, but I've seen founders like Brian Chesky of Airbnb, Mark Zuckerberg, Facebook, the founders of Shopify, they're popping up on podcasts on
Putting
my feed.
themselves out there.
Yeah, is it intentional? What's happening?
That's the thing that I was talking to you about a few minutes ago about like the importance and rise of a personal brand. Like people
Mm,
follow people, they don't follow companies.
mm.
Like, imagine the founder of Airbnb starts to decide to try out a bunch of different properties. Like, oh, if it's good enough for him, we'll try it. Let's see what he thinks. What's the checklist he goes through when picking out a property? What are some of the properties he likes to go through? Well, what are some habits he has when he checks into a property? Like, how does he do to like when he goes into a new space? Like I find, it's fascinating to see the founders of the companies show more about their lives. How do they work? What do they do? How do they run the meetings? I have a friend who is starting a restaurant, and he let everyone go behind the scenes on every part of the process. What should the chairs look like? What should the color of the walls be? Do you like this font or this font? Do you like this sign or this sign? These are 4 things on the menu. Do you prefer this flavor or this flavor? And for 6 to 7 or 8 months, he was just like having the people go along the process of him building the restaurant. And by the time he opened the restaurant on day one, there was a line out the door because everyone that was there was sort of an employee that had a stake in picking the colors of the chairs or the menus or the fonts or where things would go. And I find that's the kind of like authenticity and transparency that you can connect with the brand that's priceless.
That's amazing. Another thing, I've noticed that you've started your podcast. How long has that been and what catalyzed that? And what's your thoughts on podcasting? Is it still too late? What made you want to create one?
Yeah, so I have a podcast, like season 8 is coming out in probably a month or so. But I feel like, when I started my podcast, so I always consumed podcasts. Like I like listening to them in the airport, at the gym, when I'm out for a walk, when I don't have in meetings, I want to listen to something. Like I like having talking as like talk radio or talk podcast, like going on in the background. And I also learn from them. So I was always a huge consumer of podcasts. And then I thought when I was trying to like think about building my brand and telling more stories to help more people, I wasn't really comfortable doing like videos like I am now. I wasn't really comfortable creating content where I had to be in front of the camera. Am I too fat? Do I not like my hair? Like I got to figure out, like, I just don't like the angles or the lighting. I didn't have the right equipment. It was just an overthinking list of excuses. So I'm like, you know what? I listen to podcasts. I like podcasts. I like to talk. This is easy. It's frictionless. It's something I can do with my phone very quickly. I can go record a podcast. I don't need a lot of costs and expenses to do it. Why don't I start a podcast? And I like to talk to people. I like to interview people. So if you listen to the very first season, it's just me and my producer. We're just talking. And so it's just like conversations. It's not interviewing anybody. It's just us talking about topics. But then it just kind of grew from there. And I just started like interviewing people, reach out to people, planning. I feel like podcasts are a very, very strong platform till today. That's why you see every celebrity launching their own podcast, and they're actually doing well. A lot of athletes have their own podcasts. The athletes are like discovering that they can be their own media companies, go direct to consumer, talk about their brands, talk about their passions. So I feel like podcasts are still going to continue to grow.
Talking about that, like going through your Instagram, going through your podcast, you've interviewed so many cool, amazing people, celebrities. Any advice when it comes to being such a cool people person? How have you sort of been able to sort of get access to so many amazing person? And I know you yourself, just talking to you now, you do have that amazing personality where you have high EQ, you love listening, you're very attentive. So it makes sense how. But I'd love some advice for the audience.
Yeah. So a couple things. You don't get if you don't ask. So what's the worst they can say is no. And then make sure that you're giving them value. Like you're actually saying, okay, these are the things that are very specific with your ask. Like, I'm not going to take more than 25 minutes of your time. I will come to you. We can even do it remotely. Like, make it easy for the guest to say yes. And then be patient, because if they're traveling or they're not available, don't get discouraged, but then move on to the next. Create a list of all the key people that you'd love to have on your podcast. Then find out, do I have access to them directly? If I don't, can I send them a DM? If I can't send a DM or they're not responding to a DM, do I know somebody who knows them? A lot of times I give people to advice to people that if they're going to go to like an event and they really want to speak at that event, but they don't know anyone involved in that event, go to the event website, find out who are the previous speakers. Do I know any of those previous speakers? No, I don't. Then go to the sponsors, all the companies that are the sponsors. Do I know anybody that works at those companies of the sponsors? And then if you do, maybe you have a family member or a friend who might know somebody who works at that company. You're going to find a contact between the current, previous speakers, previous or current sponsors, media partners, and then every site, every website, even on my social media, has a contact us, and there's an email there. So you can always make sure that you are using the contacts the way that they've given you, like the contacts that they've given you to lead them to them. So if they put a email on that, use that email. Don't necessarily need to DM them. So, always make sure that if you have a social media page, make sure that you have a way for people to contact you and make it easy for them.
You talked about sort of doing talks, getting to events. I don't know if I'm sort of just procrastinating, but in my mind, I'm like, I don't know if I need to do that. I don't know if I'd rather focus on pitching press and sort of get articles. Like if I go, it feels like a one-time thing. It doesn't feel evergreen. So I'm telling myself all these things. Are there some really cool benefits that I might be missing out on by not going out and reaching and trying to get into events and doing talks?
No, I feel like you don't need to go to events to network with people. If you are good at LinkedIn, you are good at Instagram DMing, if you're good at engaging with people on their posts through comments on LinkedIn or Instagram or Twitter, that is just as effective as attending an event. And guess what? It's cheap because it's free. So I feel like you just need to live on people's pages and show your active and genuine engagement and interest in their topic. That's a terrific way to get people's attention. And then follow people. Like when people see that you followed them, they're like, oh, who just followed me? I might look them up and find out what there is. And then right after you follow them, perhaps send them a DM saying, I'm so glad to be following you. Honestly, there's a lot of ways to do that instead of going to physical events. There's a lot of virtual events as well. So just finding your niche and how you can communicate the best way would be great.
That's beautiful. Maha, tell me a bit about this book that you've been writing and working on. The 7 sort of rules. Tell me about that.
So I have a book I wrote. It's coming out on October 8th, 2024. It's available now for pre-order on Amazon. And it's called The 7 Rules of Self-Reliance. How to stay low, keep moving, invest in yourself, and own your future. And the premise of the book is to give you skills to be resourceful. How can you be resourceful and rely on yourself to achieve the dreams and goals that you want? It is a business and leadership book, but it also has a lot of inspiring stories and real world examples from my experiences, from my work that I've done with Google, with Netflix, with Gary, with Deepak Chopra, with other clients that we've served. And I find that the book's actually main purpose is to help people kind of have a playbook for how to navigate now. So with the age of AI, with real-time communication, with, disruption that's happening by, I don't just compete with the person next to me, I'm competing with the global talent pool because of remote working. So that's the premise of the book. There are 7 rules. I really believe that whoever reads this book, whether it's a student or an entrepreneur or someone who's thinking about how to level themselves up, will get a lot of value and insight on how they can kind of be in control of doing the things that they want. Self-reliance to me is not about like not cooperating with other people or working with others and saying, oh, I got it, I don't need anybody. It's actually the exact opposite. It's a little bit about having the self-awareness to know what you need to know and what you need to do, and then where to go to get that help. How to build a network, how to build your personal brand, how to create value for other people. There's a whole chapter on my methodology that has worked for me. How to think about your reputation as a currency. What is its worth? What's its value? And then last but not least, I have a whole chapter in there around learning and unlearning and relearning, because I feel like unless you're going to be curious and continuously learning and adopting to what's happening in the marketplace, you're going to be left behind. And so I give people really good understandings of like, where do I go to learn? What are the best things to learn? How do I unlearn or relearn some of the things I have? So there's old, outdated concepts that we've been taught, and those industries have been disrupted already. So how do we learn new things and adapt new concepts and stay sharp into what's happening in the now and in the future?
What catalyzed you to write this book, and what was the writing process like?
Yeah, it's such a good question. First of all, I've been wanting to write a book for like a long time, like 10 years or something. I'm like, I'm going to write a book. And then last year, I was like, you know what? You talk a lot about having this goal and you're actually not doing it. So last year, I was like, I'm going to write a book proposal. I'm going to have to figure out like, what is this book actually about? Is it a memoir? Is it a business book? Is it a communications book? Is it a leadership book? That process took me like 7 months, like to figure out how I'm going to frame it, what I'm going to be about. And then I had the assistance of somebody who helped me write this formal book proposal, which is basically an overview about what the book is about, a breakdown of every chapter. So you have to think through every chapter and then submit the first full chapter. And then a little bit about you and why you're the expert to tell this story. So you put that in a book proposal, you send it to a bunch of publishers, and then if someone likes your book and they decide to bet on you and give you a chance, they publish your book. And then it took me like 2.5 or 2 or 3 months to write the book. It came pretty quickly. Like it was like homework every night. I'd be like a Thursday night, I'm going to put in a couple hours, write some stuff, do some research, check some facts. And then, I just broke it down into small chunks, and then it was really, really easy. It's a fast read. It's less than 300 pages of a book, so it's pretty fast. You can read it in a couple of days. And there's like downloadable exercises and reflections and cheat sheets and more value beyond what's in the book to help people really take it and learn to the next level.
And you talked about it being focused on the now. So does it talk about AI? Does it talk about...
There is. One of the chapters talks about some of the key things that we need to be focused on for the future. It talks a lot about AI. It talks a lot about this frictionless world that we live in. It talks a lot about storytelling. So yeah, it does touch on the 5 biggest trends, I think, that are here to stay, that people need to really hone in on it and get ahead of the curve on.
Maha, have you utilized AI when it comes to marketing or press or PR?
For the book?
For just PR in general, in marketing, yeah.
Yeah, so I do use some of the ChatGPT, and I use some of those prompts to help. Like if I like, there's a different Gemini, there's other tools that I use to like figure out what's the best way to, if I'm stuck on an idea and I want some stimulation, I definitely use them. I haven't done any of the creative stuff like the editing or the artwork or anything like that yet. I'm just not that good at it. I don't have the time to like really spend more time on it. Like I'd love to play around with that and learn how it works, but I feel like it should be part of everyone's day to dabble in it and to study and to see what it's about, so that you don't feel so threatened by it or afraid of it.
And then you also talked about how there was like a chapter on sort of giving value and sort of how to do that. How do you find out what people might need or value? Like if you go to an event, you meet someone cold, let's say he's a founder that recently exited and now he's just sort of looking for the next opportunity. That's so broad. Like how do I go ahead and give value, or how do I even ask the right questions to find what he might need?
You could just ask him
Mm.
that good old easy question. Like, what is it that I can do to bring you value? And then he's like, well,
Mm,
I don't know, Maha, what do you do? And then I say, well, I do communications, I do this, I do that, and I explain what I do. But like sometimes in your example of this guy, this venture capitalist does angel investing, I can say, what kind of sectors are you interested in investing in?
mm,
Is there a market that you haven't explored before? Or is there a specific vertical that you're interested in? Because then he might say, I'm interested in food companies. And then I can think, do I know anybody in a food company? And then he might say, I'm interested in doing angel investing overseas. And I'm like, well, would you been to Dubai? Are you interested in Saudi? Are you interested in Egypt? So you got to ask those questions. And the key is open-ended questions.
mm.
Like, what do you care about the most? What are the things you are focused on? So asking open-ended questions so that you can get that feedback and insight from them.
And let's say if you're communicating through email, what's the best way at that? Because if I send them over, hey, what are you interested in? I don't think I'll get a response. It's one of those fluffy questions. I think in person it works really well. Any way to build that
Yeah.
relationship over email?
The one it's almost the same way that you do it over LinkedIn, right? So what I try to do if I'm going to connect with someone over email or LinkedIn or Instagram DM is I tell them very specifically what I'm looking for or interested in because you want to be direct so they don't wonder what you're trying to do. And then the
Mm,
second thing is I try to get them on a call. Can we get 10 minutes?
mm,
Somebody can spare 10 minutes. You're not asking for 30 minutes or an hour. Like sometimes if somebody really important, like, can I just get 5 minutes of your time? They're like, I don't have 5 minutes. You're like, you don't have 5 minutes? Everybody has 5 minutes. So make the ask small, make the ask reasonable, and make the ask not time consuming for them.
mm. You talked about Dubai and Saudi Arabia. That's something that has been just coming up more and more in my feed, and I see you've been going to Dubai a lot. What's happening there? Is that the next sort of epicenter? What's your read on Dubai? Should I move there?
Yeah, I feel like, well, first of all, Dubai like is a very it's a city of the future, right? It's sort of like a utopia. They have incredible infrastructure, incredible restaurants, incredible easy place to live. They don't take taxes on a lot of stuff like they do here. So I feel like it's been attractive for that reason. They just started introducing like a VAT tax and stuff, but like there's no income tax. They don't take half of your paycheck like they do here. So it has a lot of, beautiful benefits of living in a place like that. So I feel like that's one thing. It's a great city. They have everything organized, infrastructure. They're a small country, so they can do things, the UAE, well. The second thing is you look at where is economic growth coming from, right? Europe is not really growing at 10x or 5x or 3x the way the Middle East is. Asia is pretty much closed off to the rest of the world. We can't do business in China. There's a lot of restrictions. It's difficult to set up a company there versus the language barrier, all kinds of things. In Dubai, everyone speaks English. They have it easy for you to set up a company. They make it easy for you to go there. So I feel like economically they're booming. Secondly, it's a great place to live. Third, the climate's incredible weather. So I feel like there's a lot of reasons why businesses are looking at the Middle East. There's incredible, disposable income and business opportunity there. Saudi obviously has an incredible economic engine that they're now into a big, renaissance of what they're changing and what they're doing. So I think they're open for business in ways they haven't been before. Now it's easy to get a visa to go to Saudi. So people are discovering the business opportunities that exist. All the big sports events are being held there now. F1, tennis tournaments, boxing matches, a FIFA World Cup, the Asian Games. So I feel like it's a big demographic of footprint of people that are countries that are going to start to get a lot of exposure and traffic and people care about discovering new things. And I think there's also a good passion for a lot of the culture, a lot of the ancient history culture of Egypt, the food that people eat in the region. So I find like that's another one reason driving it.
Interesting. A lot of our audience are sort of younger entrepreneurs, digital nomads, and the hotspots would be, Bali, Thailand, Colombia, Mexico. What advice would you have for them if you were like, hey, like maybe you should check out Dubai and why?
I mean, I think for the reasons I just gave, like
Yeah.
it's a great place to live, it's great climate. They really encourage entrepreneurs to come start up businesses there. They have an enormous regulation, like a good regulatory environment, so it's easy for you to feel protected and safe from for your money. And I feel like, real estate is booming. They can't make enough places for people to live and apartments and homes. So I feel like digital nomads are all over Dubai. Like they understand the market opportunity, high speed internet everywhere, lots of co-working spaces. It's fun. I'm going back in a couple weeks, actually. I love it.
When
I
you
lived there for eight or 9 years. So
Interesting. What made you come back to America after staying there for 8 years? What brought you back to America?
yeah, I came home for the pandemic because I thought it would be like a 6 month thing. Like, let's just, go home to spend time with family during this lockdown. And that 6 month lockdown turned into a 2 year lockdown. And then when the world opened back up, I go back quite a bit for business and work, and I have a home in Egypt. And so I spend a lot of time in the region.
That's so cool. What's Egypt like now? Because I've always wanted to check out the pyramids. Is it still accessible? I'm always hearing different news of the Middle East. I don't know if it's safe, if it's not, but I see people having fun in Egypt and traveling.
So with the dollar currency, Egypt is an extremely affordable place to be right now. So like $1 is worth like 70 pounds or something now, or 50 pounds. So you'll be able to get a lot of bang for your buck. And so you can have a 5 course meal for a very affordable amount of money. No, Egypt is safe. I mean, obviously with what's happening in Palestine, you don't want to be anywhere near the Rafah border, which is very far from Cairo and the main city, but it's really, Egypt is kind of the cultural capital of the Middle East. All the films and TV shows and books come out of Cairo and come out of Egypt for the rest of the Middle East and the Arab world. It's sort of like the Hollywood. So it's great. Egypt's obviously, I'm Egyptian, so I'm very biased. I love Egypt so much. And I feel like if you haven't been to the pyramids, you got to go. As if it's not on your bucket list, it needs to be.
Most definitely. When you sort of did this talk with the young entrepreneurs today, and they were sort of asking advice on what to do with marketing, what advice were you giving to young entrepreneurs?
It was such a great experience, to be honest, because they're all in different industries.
Mm.
Uh, IT consultants, an HR recruiter, a company that's doing a startup for decaf coffee to make normalizing decaf coffee like non-alcoholic beverages. I had 3 teenagers who have their own businesses, one disrupting the garbage industry, and 2 girls who have a lip gloss and a bracelet business. So it was a wide range from 15-year-olds to older adults. But I feel like the biggest question that they had was marketing is so confusing right now. Does marketing equal social media, or do traditional marketing channels still matter? Lead generation, emails, sponsoring events, campaigns through digital advertising or television advertising or outdoor advertising or print advertising. So the answer is not one size fits all for all of these companies, right? It has to be tailored to, are you doing B2B? Are you marketing to businesses? Are you marketing B2C? You're marketing to consumers. Do you sell your product in a retail store? Or do you sell it online, direct to consumer? So you have to ask a lot of questions to learn about how to give them specific advice for their industries. But I think the overall message that I would love to share with you and your listeners is your marketing campaigns have to be tailored to your industry and segment, right? So how you market for a service is much different than how you market for a product. So people who have products have to get samples in the hands of the users. They might need to give it to some of the influencers to try it. So their strategy for their marketing would be much different than somebody who's doing a tax service, for example, who really needs to sell their product or their service to like tax preparers and tax companies and consumers as well. So first message is you have to, understand your industry and your vertical and sector. 2 is you need to go where your consumers are. Are your consumers direct, businesses or direct to consumer? And then I think the last thing is like, how do you stay sharp with the different tools that are out there? Like if you're going to put money into social media, are you putting your money behind Facebook or LinkedIn? I spent a lot of time today talking to entrepreneurs about the importance of LinkedIn for business leads, for networking, for developing a LinkedIn newsletter, developing maybe perhaps campaigns on LinkedIn to target some of your customers, and how do you contribute to articles to become a leading voice. So that's kind of what we focused on today.
When you talk about LinkedIn, like LinkedIn feels like this sort of this jungle. You go in, you get a bunch of random people connecting with you, a bunch of people randomly messaging you. There's these open-ended random questions. You don't know who anyone is. It seems like everyone's just selling to each other. Yeah, how do you, what is LinkedIn?
Yeah, I mean, LinkedIn is not a jobs platform. I think a lot of people think, let's go to LinkedIn because that's where we're going to go to find a job or recruit people. It's not just that anymore. It's really a business hub of where you can get thought leadership, you can get insights, you can actually learn. There's a whole LinkedIn learning track that teaches you things. You can also connect with people. It's a great tool for networking. It's a great tool for showing your expertise on something. And the content that's there is different than the content you see like on TikTok, obviously more entertaining, or on Instagram, more visual with videos, and more sort of timely to my industry. Like if I want to work with a community of women entrepreneurs, I'm going to go and find those on LinkedIn. I'm not going to find the community of female entrepreneurs on Instagram because they're not going to be in anywhere. I have to follow people individually or a company. So I find like it allows you that access to really dive deep into relationship building based on the verticals and interests of your business and the needs of current customers or prospecting new customers.
When it comes to sort of personal branding, building relationships, has there anything, is there something that's working surprisingly well at the moment? Something that you see that you or your clients are doing that's like, wow, like this is surprisingly doing well?
I mean, I think anyone who makes an effort to create content and make it personal and features them, that always does well, right? Your personal brand should not be outsourced to somebody else to do it. It's personal. It means to be you. And I think that's the biggest thing that I think I want people to walk away from is like, I can't get a social media agency to work on your personal brand. You need to do it yourself.
I love that, Maha. Last two questions that we usually wrap up these podcasts with. One, any recent discoveries that you have implemented to your life?
Oh, I'm trying to think. What did I do that's new? I mean, I don't think there's anything new that I discovered that I'm implementing into my life, except for, oh wait, I have one. I do consume more streaming news. Like I didn't used to watch a lot of streaming news because I was just curious. I'm like, what is on those streaming channels for news? So that's a new one that I do and I love it. I learned so much by watching new news channels because it gives me new insights. Because if I keep watching the same thing, I'll get the same stuff. So I'm like, I need to check. I need to have incoming information from other sources. So that's one new thing that I did. And then the other thing, it's not new, but it's just being consistent, is like I do like to read good old fashioned books. Like I'm a book reader. I'm not an audiobook person. I'm not a Kindle person, but I feel like I like the art of holding a book in my hand, underlining things in my book and keeping it on my shelf.
I love that. Last question, any personal sort of goals or focus for the next 6 months?
The book, this is my big goal and focus, is this book, getting it to market, helping people learn from it, helping bring more people value from it. I'm doing workshops. I have a Facebook group, so I'm trying to like get more content out there for free in a different format than I do through the other one. So I can actually talk to my community, ask them polls, find out what they want to learn. And then I do live webinars with them every couple of weeks. So that's the main focus.
That's epic, Maha. Maha, where can people find the Facebook group that you just mentioned? Where's the best place for them to get more of you, get the book, everything?
I would love them to join the Facebook group. It's called 7 Rules. You can look it up. And then on Instagram, I'm Maha Gabber, Mahagaber. And on LinkedIn.
I'll link everything below. Thank you so much for your time today, Maha. I really appreciate it. You're so attentive. You're such a great listener. You really packed this episode with a ton of value, and you're such a great people person. So I really enjoyed having you on today.
Andy, I'm a huge fan of your work. Keep up the great work that you're doing, and the questions were awesome.
Thank you so much, Maha. Guys, if you made it this far, hope you guys got some value from today's episode, and I'll see you guys next week on another episode. Peace.